Chapter 28, Gold as a Galleon. It was a time for the spreading of news. Over Easter, Dobby and Winky had managed to smuggle 50,000 re-information leaflets back home with the Hogwarts students, tucked away within 100 thick hardcover books. By early May, the Order could see the effects rippling across the nation, with new sympathizer groups emerging to push back against the Death Eaters regime in every major city. This brought a glimmer of hope, but it also created a more volatile situation. Nearly every day, they received reports of individuals brutalized or murdered for their resistance. To make matters worse, the Daily Prophet had reported that Pious Thickness had taken a leave of absence due to a nervous complaint. There was no doubt among the Order about what that meant for Thickness. As the Order and their allies braced for Voldemort's return, they prepared for the confrontation that awaited when he finally stepped into the spotlight. News was spreading within headquarters as well, though of a very different nature. They clung to moments of lightness wherever they could find them to help make the days more bearable. Soon, every member of the Order was aware of the undefined connection between Ron and Pansy, which sparked a flurry of teasing from the Weasley twins that Draco certainly did not envy. It was also common knowledge now that Draco and Hermione were officially boyfriend and girlfriend. He allowed himself to bask in this one bright spot amid the surrounding danger. It felt almost silly how smug it made him, just sliding into a seat beside Hermione, brushing his hand against hers, and seeing the pleased smile on her face. Every time she looked at him, he felt like a cat lounging in a warm patch of sunlight. "You two are revolting," Ginny remarked one afternoon, a hint of admiration in her voice. Of course, sharing this news came with its own set of implications. It was a week into May before Draco gathered the courage to share the cover story they had crafted with his parents. "I won't be there," Hermione reminded him gently. "Whatever they say, it can't hurt me." "I know," he replied, steeling himself for the task ahead. "Just recite the story, and we'll be fine. 12 uses of dragon's blood in your mind if you want to block it out." Draco's mouth twitched into a smile. "We learned that in first year, Granger. Give me a bit more of a challenge than that." They joked about distractions for a little while longer, but nothing seemed to ease Draco's nerves. That night, he returned to his parents' tent with a sense of trepidation, his pulse racing as they read quietly throughout the evening. Finally, when it became clear that no natural opening into the subject would present itself, Draco closed his book and spoke up. "I forgot to mention. There's something you two should know." He aimed for a casual tone, but his throat felt thin, as though he were forcing the words through a hollow reed. "Oh?" his mother replied, not looking up from the Practical Potioneer's Guide to Ingredient Harvesting. "I'm pretending to be involved with that Granger girl. They'll never expect that I'd do something like that to get information." His parents' heads snapped up in unison. Draco braced himself for revulsion or outraged panic, but instead, he was met with a heavy silence. His father's mouth hung open in disbelief. Draco sighed, feigning impatience. I know. But I promise you, it's a good plan. What better way is there to get in with the Order's inner circle?" Lucius slowly nodded, his expression thoughtful. "True. Yes, there would be few more certain paths to gain their trust." He swirled his fire whiskey, looking disturbed. "I must admit, even the thought of. But no matter. The circumstances are extraordinary." Both of their gazes turned to Narcissa, whose eyes were wide with surprise. Draco tightened his grip on his book, bracing himself for her verdict. He half expected her to lash out, to revile the notion of her precious pure-blood son being tainted by a muggle-born, but instead, Narcissa spoke in a tense, unfamiliar voice. "This is significant." She snapped the Practical Potioneer's Guide shut and rose to her feet. "This shows that the Order truly believes you to be one of them." "Draco. I've been waiting for a sign like this for quite some time." "You, really?" "Yes." She moved purposefully to the bookshelf, then back to the mantel. "And I believe it's time for you and me to make similar inroads, Lucius. If something goes wrong with our plans involving Bellatrix, wrong?" His father's initial look of disturbance shifted to alarm as he rose to his feet. "Narcissa, what are you suggesting?" "Nothing will go awry. Draco has infiltrated the Order to expose the Potter boy. We will succeed, We must succeed, yet there have been plans to eliminate Harry Potter before. Narcissa's retort cut through the air like a whip, her composure faltering. She quickly tucked a strand of her ice-blonde hair behind her ear and continued more calmly. Plans devised by Barty Crouch, a formidable wizard, and even by the Dark Lord himself. And still, here Potter stands. I refuse to dismiss the possibility that Dumbledore has bestowed some power upon his favorite, even if Potter himself is unaware of it. Lucius's eyes sharpened. So, you are suggesting, I suggest we take a cue from our son. Narcissa delicately touched the opal bracelet on her wrist, a cherished black family heirloom. Draco may not be genuinely loyal to the Order, but for all intents and purposes, he has joined them. He has shared some information with them. We have information to offer as well, to win their favor. No matter what unfolds, Draco can claim he was working for the winning side. Lucius. He will survive. If our family is to endure, we must not shy away from safety wherever we can find it. Silence enveloped the tent. Draco rose, feeling incredulous. The fact that his mother hadn't uttered a word against Hermione was shocking enough, but the notion of his parents becoming informants for the Order? After months of attempting to undermine the Order from within, his mother was finally having doubts. Draco glanced at his father. Lucius was absent-mindedly turning the Malfoy golden signet ring on his little finger, a perfect match to Draco's silver ring of the same design. His expression was filled with reluctance, bordering on distaste, as if he were being forced to take a bite of a dish he knew would revolt him. Draco felt a jolt of recognition. He had seen that same look before. It mirrored the way he had joined forces with Hermione, Harry, and Ron. He had reassured himself that by helping the Gryffindors, he was merely ensuring his own safety, despite his deep-seated disdain for them. It had been the first step he took down this uncertain path, one that seemed necessary at the time. I think she has a good point, Father, Draco ventured, testing the waters. The words snapped Lucius from his reverie. Enough. It's a decision for your mother and me to make. Draco, to bed, now. In the weeks that followed, Draco kept a close watch on both of them. The plan to steal Hufflepuff's cup was progressing steadily. Bill had scheduled a visit from several goblins to headquarters. And throughout May, Professor McGonagall was teaching Dobby and Winky how to open a flow passage into the deserted Ollivanders. Yet, a part of Draco's mind remained fixated on his parents. He often felt as though he had just missed a crucial conversation when he entered the tent. As the weather grew warmer, Lucius and Narcissa began to spend more time on the cottage's back patio. Draco sometimes caught them watching the Order through the window, but they were no longer eavesdropping. They simply observed the Order as it stirred inside, their lips occasionally moving in quiet conversation. As the end of May approached, he and Hermione decided it was time to tell Harry and Ron about his mother's suggestion. The boys looked as if they had been struck in the gut with bludgers. But we can't let them join the Order, Ron protested, fanning himself with a stray leaflet. The bedroom was stiflingly hot. You've already let one. Malfoy in, said Draco. Yeah, because unlike your mum and dad, you're actually trying to stop Bellatrix from killing us all. He cast his eyes skyward, frustration evident. It won't matter what they're trying to do, Weasley. Once we get the Horcrux, I'm going to destroy that mirror and make it look like an accident. They won't be able to contact the Death Eaters anymore. They might think they're gathering information for the Order, but they won't have a way to pass it along. Yes, but... Hermione's tone was cautious. Do you really think that would change anything, or would it just be a needless risk? Draco swallowed hard, a fresh wave of desire coursing through him. Perhaps, as his parents grew accustomed to his pretend relationship with Hermione, the sight would start to feel normal to them. The thought was so enticing it almost hurt. I don't think they would have ever considered something like this before, he finally replied, even last summer, when we were at your house, Weasley. They might take advantage of the Order, sure, but giving up information? Never. Harry pondered this for a moment before saying, if they decide they want to do it. We can discuss it with the rest of the Order. Ron frowned. Come on, Harry. Look at what Lucius Malfoy has done, if they get hold of a wand, or if they leave headquarters. Yes, Hermione interjected, but look at how things have turned out since Draco joined us. Who's to say his parents couldn't be just as helpful? Look at everything we've accomplished together. They surveyed their plan spread out before them, the sword of Gryffindor resting beside them, the two destroyed Horcruxes on the desk, and the sounds of a fortified order echoing through headquarters. Ron broke into a reluctant grin. Yeah, I suppose we've done all right, haven't we? We have. Harry wasn't smiling, but his eyes gleamed with determination. And we're going to get the cup, we're going to finish this. Let's go over the plan again, Hermione suggested. And so they did, once more. In the days leading up to their mission at Gringotts, tension hung in the air. Despite weeks of preparation, Draco couldn't shake the feeling that their plan relied too much on chance. He possessed the Elder Wand, but if Bellatrix brought her husband along for the withdrawal, their odds in a direct confrontation would plummet. To bolster their chances, they decided to take Gryffindor's sword to Diagon Alley, anticipating they might have limited time with the cup, on the night before Bill's goblin friends were scheduled to arrive at Potter Cottage. They gathered late in the front room, joined by Pansy, Ginny, and Luna. After discussing their plan all afternoon, they couldn't find a way to improve it, yet sleep eluded them, so, Pansy said, her dark eyes flicking between them. Are you going to tell us why we need to stay out of the cottage tomorrow afternoon? Not a chance, Ron replied with a grin. See? Pansy turned to Ginny and Luna. I told you they're up to something. Ron chuckled, like you've never plotted anything before. Ginny sighed, nudging Harry. You could at least give us a hint. Sorry, Gin, Harry said. Just then, he doubled over, his hand flying to his scar. Everyone leaned forward in concern. Harry? Ginny asked sharply. What's wrong? What happened? Nothing, Harry managed to say, forcing his trembling hand away from his head, though his eyes remained shut against the pain. Never mind, I'm fine. But as soon as Pansy, Ginny, and Luna had gone to bed, Draco turned to Harry. What was that, Potter? Has someone died? Ron asked, his voice low. No, not yet, Harry replied, swallowing hard. Voldemort has figured out that it was Grindelwald who stole the Elder Wand. He's on his way to Nurmengard. The next day, 3 goblins arrived at headquarters, stepping out of the flue with 3 emerald flashes. They were named Gornik, Griphook, and Bogrod exchanged brief handshakes with Bill and Harry before nodding toward Draco. Hermione and Ron, what exactly do you want us to read? Griphook asked, his tone laced with suspicion. Here, Hermione said, pulling out pieces of parchment on which she had copied their written scripts. Gornik, you can take part A, Griphook, you have part B, and Bogrod, you'll handle part C. The goblins frowned at the parchment. This suggests, Bogrod said frostily, that Gringotts would be willing to hand over a piece of treasure to someone who isn't its rightful owner. We know it's against your code, Harry replied. That's why we're asking you to make an exception. The result is the same, Gornik said, his voice accusatory. You intend to remove this cup from the safety of Gringotts for your own gain. No, Hermione interjected quickly. It's not about us at all. We couldn't care less about the cup under normal circumstances, but it's necessary for the war. Harry nodded in agreement. We're not trying to enrich ourselves or steal something for our own purposes. We're fighting Voldemort, and this could be the most crucial step in stopping what he's doing across the country. The goblins, still wary, continued to read the scripts for a while longer. Eventually, Griphook exchanged a few short sentences with the other goblins in gobbledygook. Gornik looked doubtful but eventually nodded. The reign of you-know-who must fall, Griphook said grimly. And we believe you are working toward that end. Harry Potter. Come. Everyone except Draco filed into the dining room. Hermione, the last to enter, offered Draco a brief smile before closing the door behind her. He gazed down the silent hall into the empty front room. The rest of the order had honored Harry's request. Those who weren't at the safe houses were tucked away in their respective tents. The Potter cottage was quiet and still. The cottage felt empty, just as it had since December, when only Draco, Hermione, and Harry had walked its old floorboards. He paused for a moment, soaking in the calm before the storm. Then, with determination, he moved swiftly through the cottage. Once outside, he sprinted down the garden path and burst into his parents' tent. "We need to talk to Bellatrix," he panted, now. His parents jumped to their feet, startled. "Why?" Lucius asked, his brow furrowed. "Potter's having a meeting inside. He's invited goblins, and everyone else has gone somewhere else. I think it's about that weapon, the artifact Bella wanted to know about." Draco waved his hand dismissively. "The point is, they've forgotten to perform the Muffliato charm on the door. If we hurry, we can listen in." His father sprang into action, grabbing the mirror from the mantel. "Bellatrix Lestrange," he called. Soon, Draco was creeping back inside, cautious as if they might be overheard, guiding his parents into the kitchen. The mirror was held tightly in his mother's hand. With Bellatrix's face filling the glass, her expression tense and eager, as Draco eased the back door shut, he slipped his hand into his pocket and grasped the elder wand. Flagrate, he thought. Nothing visible happened, but he knew that just beyond the dining room door, a fiery X would ignite in the air, signaling the start of the script. He pressed a finger to his lips, urging his parents to be quiet as they crept down the hall. Voices drifted toward them, clear and distinct beneath the dining room door. They paused to listen. "What you ask of us is highly unusual," Bogrod was saying. "It may even be unprecedented in our history. We do not often seek to ally ourselves with wand carriers." "We're not asking for an alliance," Harry's voice replied. "It's just a favor. We only need one thing." "We cannot break the code of Gringotts lightly," Griphook countered. "But it's important," Ron interjected, his impatience evident. Narcissa pressed the mirror closer to the keyhole, straining to hear every word. Draco stole a glance at his aunt. She had turned ashen, her eyes wide with shock. "No other goblin would help you in this matter," Gornick stated, a line Hermione had suggested, hoping it would spare the Gringotts goblins from Bellatrix's wrath. "Does that mean you'll do it?" Hermione asked eagerly. "You'll help us?" Bogrod sighed deeply. "Very well. We will assist you in retrieving the item tomorrow." "But the vault in question is very old," Griphook interjected, "one of the oldest. You know its fortifications. We'll need to think carefully about how to procure this." "You said it was a small golden cup, correct?" If they had truly been eavesdropping, Bellatrix would have exposed them. She inhaled sharply, and Narcissa paled, clutching the mirror tightly. "Go, go." Bellatrix hissed. "Go." They sprinted back down the hall, through the kitchen, and into the garden, not stopping to speak until they reached his parents' tent. "What is it, Bellatrix?" Lucius demanded, his voice tense. "What does it mean?" "We are in more danger than you can possibly imagine," she whispered. Her eyes darting wide with alarm, fury began to creep into her expression. "I must go immediately. This cannot. I cannot. I must go." And just like that, she vanished. The mirror reflected only Draco and his anxious-looking parents. "The cup?" Draco asked, trying to sound indifferent. "Why is that so important?" "I don't know," Lucius murmured, his brow furrowing. "Perhaps it could be the cup of the Covenant. The Dark Lord would not take kindly to its loss, yet." Bellatrix's reaction. Seizing the opportunity, Draco declared, "I'll go back and keep listening. You two shouldn't be inside." He was acutely aware that even now, Hermione, Harry, and Ron would be emerging from the flow, stepping into Ollivander's dusty shop. Bellatrix would likely be operating into the Leaky Cauldron checkpoint, probably storming past the line to have her paperwork checked. Time was of the essence. He hadn't taken 3 steps toward the tent flap when his mother suddenly seized him by the wrist. "No. It's fine, Mother. They trust me, remember?" He attempted to pull away, but her grip only tightened. "No. You mustn't be involved in this, Draco. There's a reason Bellatrix didn't share more." "Listen to your mother," Lucius interjected sharply. If Bella says the situation is dangerous, we must take her seriously. Your aunt doesn't speak of risk lightly. He placed the mirror back on the mantel. We wait for her to contact us again. Draco felt his heart contract. He needed to transfigure himself and get through the flow. There was no time to waste. As he sorted through excuses, Lucius continued, on that note, Draco, I've been carefully considering your mother's suggestion about keeping us all safe, this idea of appearing to join hands with the Order. I agree that it's the best course of action. Draco's thoughts jolted back to the Horcrux. He turned his head sharply toward his father. You'll do it? He asked. Both of you, you'll go along with what I'm doing? His parents nodded in unison. Draco knew he had to leave the tent and get to Ollivander's, yet his feet felt as if they were glued to the ground. He envisioned his father sitting stiffly beside the Weasleys in a meeting. Worn down over time, gradually becoming exhausted by the effort it took to scorn everyone around him. A man who so prized intelligence would inevitably recognize Hermione's brilliance, no matter how reluctant he might be to admit it at first. He imagined his mother exchanging terse words with Tonks, perhaps catching a glimpse of Andromeda in her demeanor. Draco squeezed the Elder Wand in his pocket, a wild feeling of possibility coursing through him. When he returned, he would break the mirror. He would advocate for his parents to the Order. They only needed to execute the plan. All right, he said, trying to sound casual. I suppose we'll have to figure out the details later. Others are expecting me in there. I'll just wait in the front room, where they left me, okay? His mother, still gripping his arm, searched his expression for any sign of defiance. Draco let out a sigh. I promise I won't eavesdrop anymore. Finally, her grip loosened. He pulled his wrist free, rubbing it ruefully for a moment, as if he had all the time in the world. I'll see you later. And I want to know what Aunt Bella says if she contacts us again. The second he stepped out of the tent, he broke into a run. He was surprised, Lucius remarked once Draco had left. Yes, I expected he would be, Narcissa replied, approaching her husband and resting her head in the crook of his neck. He must not want his situation disrupted. It is delicate, that much is true, but he'll realize we can accomplish more together. Indeed, Lucius said, kissing her forehead. I suppose we should put these away if we're to join the rabble. When Narcissa pulled back, she noticed he was holding one of the extendable ears. She raised an eyebrow at him, having overheard an unfinished sentence. He offered a thin smile and continued, but perhaps we should use them one last time. I don't want Draco involved, but he was right. There's surely more to learn from the goblin's conversation. I'm curious about why Bella reacted the way she did. Narcissa hesitated. Once more, then. She murmured, taking the other flesh-colored thread from the cup on the mantel. They crept out into the garden and around the side of the cottage, staying low, their heads just beneath the windowsills, moving as quickly as they could. However, when they reached the dining room window, they found the table empty. Lucius swore quietly under his breath. They must have left in a hurry. Narcissa narrowed her eyes at the open door, or perhaps they suspected an eavesdropper and moved to another room? This way. The sunshine beat down upon their robes as they cautiously made their way forward. Narcissa slunk to the front of the cottage, coming to an abrupt halt as she peered through the window. For a moment, she couldn't comprehend what she was witnessing. Then it clicked. The dark-haired figure before them was Draco, casting spells on himself, transfiguring into an older man with a mustache. As he swept a jar of flow powder from the mantel and took a pinch, Narcissa gasped sharply, Lucius. Lucius rushed to her side just in time to hear Draco declare, muffled but still audible, Ollivanders. Without hesitation, he stepped into the swirling green flames and vanished. Lucius and Narcissa bolted for the door, bursting through the threshold. What has he done? Narcissa gasped, struggling to catch her breath as spots danced before her eyes. There was no more dangerous place for any of them than Diagon Alley. Ollivanders, Lucius said, realization dawning as he strode toward the grate. This connection must be how the Order plans to break into Gringotts. Draco must have seen them leave and given chase. He turned back to Narcissa, his face etched with dread. That's where they've gone, all of them. Draco must be trying to capture Potter for Bellatrix as we speak. Narcissa pressed her hand to her racing heart, her mind racing. She had hoped Draco would appreciate their caution, that he would prioritize safety over zealotry, just as Lucius had finally agreed to do. But it seemed her son had absorbed the Dark Lord's messages all too well. As she fought to regain her breath, a painful clarity struck her. They should never have been such diligent teachers. They should have known better than to impose any of this on their son. We have no time to lose, Narcissa said in a harsh whisper, sweeping the jar from the mantel. What took you? Hermione asked as Draco slipped out of the window of Ollivander's and into the side alley. Parents, Draco murmured as Narcissa lifted her wand to double-check his transfiguration. I'll explain later. Hermione and Ron had completed their transfigurations as well. Hermione now had pin-straight, red blonde hair, while Ron appeared as a blonde man with a bushy beard. They would have preferred using Polyjuice Potion, but they hadn't been able to gather the necessary ingredients to brew a new batch since February. Potter under the cloak? Draco asked. Here, came Harry's voice from beside him, let's go. They hurried up the side street and emerged into Diagon Alley, bathed in blazing sunlight. Draco glanced back at the boarded-up storefront of Ollivander's. It looked just as abandoned as before. In contrast, the rest of Diagon Alley had transformed significantly. Storefronts he remembered as empty had been resold. The Muggle-born-owned Elop's Owl Emporium, which his parents had always refused to enter, had been replaced by Selwyn's high-bred birds. Draco also noticed a new outpost of Borgin and Burke's nearby, its window showcasing an array of cursed objects that glittered enticingly at mesmerized passers-by. Draco began to sweat as they walked toward the gleaming white marble facade of Gringotts. The summer sunlight felt heavy, like water, and it seemed impossible that the dozens of people bustling around them couldn't simply look at the four of them, well, the three of them, and recognize the wanted criminals whose faces adorned every shopfront. Here, Hermione whispered as they approached Gringotts. Dobby had scouted Diagon Alley for them under the cover of night and told them about an alcove at an intersection just opposite the bank, which housed a disused drinking fountain. As they sidled past it, Hermione quickly cast an illusion charm, making the alcove appear to be a solid brick wall. One by one, they slipped inside, unnoticed by the harried patrons of Diagon Alley. As they slipped through the illusory barrier, they found a hidden spot to wait. Huddled together, they could still see the steps and entrance of Gringotts quite clearly through Hermione's illusion charm. I hope we haven't missed Bellatrix, Hermione whispered, her eyes scanning the tan shadow that hung in the air. We need to be sure she's gone inside. We haven't missed her. The dread in Ron's voice made Draco follow his gaze down the street, and his stomach dropped. There was Bellatrix Lestrange, striding up Diagon Alley, just as they had anticipated, but she wasn't alone, and it wasn't her husband she had brought along. Trailing behind her was a group of around 60 witches and wizards. Draco recognized 4 of them at the front as Death Eaters, while the rest were clad in ministry robes. It appeared to be an entire department, but Draco had no idea what they were doing there. His mind raced. How could this be happening? All 4 of them had been certain that Bellatrix would want to keep the Horcrux withdrawal under wraps. If Voldemort ever discovered that the Order had come close to stealing it, she would face severe punishment. She had to know that. What could possibly motivate her to make such a spectacle of it? Horror washed over them as they watched Bellatrix and her entourage approach the grand steps of Gringotts. 2 wizards at the bank's entrance, holding long, thin probity probes, let their metal wands tremble as the force marched up the steps. Ron suddenly gasped. Wait a minute, I know those robes. That's the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. What? Hermione and Harry exclaimed in unison, but Draco realized Ron was right. Hadn't he often seen Walden McNair wearing robes just like those? But why? Hermione began to ask. Out of my way. Bellatrix snarled, brandishing her wand. The security wizards dove aside, for safety, as Bellatrix's spell struck the doors of Gringotts. A low, mournful tone resonated from the marble, almost as if it were speaking. The doors swung open to reveal 4 goblins in the antechamber. The lead goblin addressed her, saying, Madame Lestrange, what is the meaning of this? You know perfectly well what my meaning is, you horrid little beast, Bellatrix hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. Your kind can no longer be trusted. We should never have allowed you such freedom, with your leniency toward mudbloods and blood traitors. She raised her voice, letting her words echo down the street. Shoppers and shopkeepers alike looked up in shock at the figure standing atop the steps as she proclaimed, by order of the Ministry of Magic, we claim this establishment and its contents for wizard kind. With a swift motion, Bellatrix wheeled around and slashed her wand downward toward the goblins. They moved with surprising agility, melting back into the bank, disappearing from view. Meanwhile, the mob of Ministry wizards surged up the steps with a roar, flooding into the grand marble hall. No! Hermione shouted, instinctively moving toward the steps. Draco quickly seized her by the upper arm. Wait! He urged. But the goblins, Hermione began, only to stop as Draco pointed. Shouts and flashes of light erupted from the magnificent doors, revealing dozens of goblins engaged in battle within the entryway. Most wielded long, beautifully crafted daggers that glimmered in the summer sun, while others donned finely made helms and armor. Though they were unarmed with wands, their agility and speed forced the wizards into a defensive stance, casting deflecting spells to keep the lethal blades at bay. If we get too close, Draco warned, they'll think we're trying to break in too. We might have to break in, Ron said, his voice filled with dread. This could be our only chance to get the cup while they're distracted. We can't stick to the plan now, can we? Maybe we can, Harry interjected. He reached for the invisibility cloak, ready to make a move. He pulled off his cloak, revealing his transfigured form, blue-eyed and baby-faced. Bellatrix still believes we know how to retrieve the cup from her vault. I'm certain she'll want it out of there, no matter the cost. Ron turned sharply to Draco. How long do you think it'll take Lestrange to reach that vault and come back? It's deep, close to my family's vault. It takes about 15 minutes to get down there and another 20 to return. And we're just supposed to stand by while the goblins are under attack? Hermione's voice trembled with indignation. Maybe we can get close enough to, Harry suddenly gasped, clutching his forehead as he staggered, nearly falling. Draco steadied him, and the others crowded into the tight space of the alcove. What's going on? Ron asked, alarmed. Voldemort. He's there, Harry managed to gasp. Blinking sweat from his eyes, he's broken through Nermangard's protections. He's in Grindelwald's cell, torturing him for answers about the Elder Wand. Then he'll discover it passed to Dumbledore, Hermione whispered. He'll come back to Britain. The four of them stood frozen, sweat trickling down their faces. The distant sounds of shouts and crashes from within Gringotts echoed down Diagon Alley. Draco could sense they were all thinking the same thought. If Voldemort returned to the country while Death Eaters and Ministry officials were gathered here, he could easily join forces with them. It would align perfectly with Rita Skeeter's sensational writings. Voldemort, the supposed champion of wizard society. Liberating Gringotts from the goblins' control. Hermione broke the silence with a muffled scream, covering her mouth with her hand. Draco's gaze shot to the top of the steps. A Ministry wizard had burst through the bank's doors, a levitated chest floating in front of him, but before he could take another step. As they stepped over the threshold, a goblin suddenly appeared, clutching a wound on his arm. He slashed his dagger behind the wizard's legs, causing the thief to howl in pain. The chest he was carrying plummeted to the ground, cracking open on the steps of Gringotts and spilling its contents like a golden waterfall. They're looting, Draco said, his eyes wide as he stared at the cascade of galleons. They're not just here to take control of Gringotts, they're emptying the vaults of Muggleborns. Of course, Harry replied through gritted teeth. I bet that's how Bellatrix convinced them all to risk their necks. Just take whatever you can steal. Ron looked stunned. We can't let them do this. Let them? Draco shot back. We can't stop them, Weasley. There are only 4 of us. If we rush in there and start fighting, we might miss our chance to see Bellatrix leave. Think about the Horcrux. Ron's face flushed with frustration, but he turned back to watch, silent. Draco's jaw clenched. He was just as unhappy about the situation as the others. He couldn't believe the scale of this miscalculation. All this, after Hermione had worried for weeks about how individual goblins might be affected. The fight raged on within the bank. After a quarter of an hour, dozens more goblins came rushing up the street, clad in finely crafted armor, bolstering Gringotts' defenses. They cut bonds, revived unconscious goblins with sparkling potions, and began a new series of battles. Yet, wizards continued to cart away hordes of treasure into the Gringotts Hall, stacking chests and crates of stolen gold higher and higher. "I can't believe we did this," Hermione whispered, her face pale. "I can't believe I didn't think of it. Wizards have tried to force Gringotts out of goblin control 3 times. Professor Binns gave us a 4-day lecture on the Goblin Rebellion of 1734. I can't believe none of these people are doing anything to help." Harry shouted, gesturing at the crowd of shoppers gathered around the steps of Gringotts, their mouths agape as they took in the chaos. "They don't have a Horcrux to find." "Let's get out in the open," Ron urged. "We want to be closer, right? Maybe we can find a way to help." They exchanged determined glances and slipped out of their hidden alcove just in time. They were only halfway through the crowd when the furious shouts from inside intensified. "It's her, the witch! Lestrange! Get out of my way!" Bellatrix shrieked. "Away, you brutes! Bombarda!" A dozen onlookers screamed as the hex struck the tower of treasure in the hall. The force of Bellatrix's spell sent crates, chests, and bags of gold flying forward. The treasure scattered both Death Eaters and goblins, then tumbled through the wide-open doors of Gringotts with a deafening crash. The chaos only escalated as wooden bindings splintered and released their contents. The sound of tens of thousands of galleons, countless sickles and nuts, cascaded down the long marble steps, spilling onto the cobbles of Diagon Alley. The fight spilled out afterward, with goblins and wizards slipping and sliding over the shimmering wave of coins, slashing and snarling as they descended the steps. Spells shot into the clear sky, and the clang of goblin-forged metal echoed off the shop fronts. A blasting spell struck a nearby building, eliciting yells from within, as the structure's beams creaked and groaned. As the panicked onlookers began to scatter for cover, Draco fought to regroup with Hermione, Harry, and Ron. They pressed against the tide, moving toward the steps. Then they saw her. Bellatrix had emerged into the open. Fended off a dozen goblins at once, a leather pouch bulged with an object the size of a fist. "That's it," Draco breathed, goosebumps creeping up his arms despite the sweltering heat. "The cup. Now!" Harry yelled. The 4 of them sprinted through the remnants of the crowd and into the chaos. They had envisioned a scenario akin to a kidnapping, with Draco wielding the Elder Wand at a crucial moment of stealth to overcome Bellatrix. They had imagined silence and subtlety, a way to sneak back into Ollivanders without being noticed, but all that was now a distant dream. They clawed their way up the steps through a landslide of galleons, struggling toward Bellatrix, who remained oblivious to their presence as she battled a dozen goblins, and it wasn't just the Ministry and goblins on the steps anymore. While many witches and wizards had fled, countless others had been drawn to the spill, shoving gold and silver into their pockets. Goblins darted over the piles of money, inhumanly agile, shouting at those pocketing coins. It was a chaotic mass of limbs and knives, the hot smell of metal baking in the sun. Voices bellowed spells as Draco staggered up the steps. Amidst the tumult, he suddenly heard his mother's voice, "Draco. Draco." He froze, then flung himself against the marble side rail, scanning the crowd. Had he misheard? How could she be here? Then he spotted them, his parents, trying to push their way into the fray at the bottom of the steps. They held wands that he could only assume they'd grabbed from the shelves at Ollivanders, and they had transfigured themselves. They would have been recognizable to few but him. "Draco!" His father shouted. "Is he here?" Draco didn't know who his father meant, but he cast a wild glance back at Bellatrix. Had she heard his name, his heart raced. Plunged into the chaos, Bellatrix had freed herself from the grip of the goblins. She stood at the top of the steps, her gaze fixed on Draco's parents, seemingly grasping the weight of his father's words, and understanding that Draco himself had missed. With a dramatic flourish, Bellatrix raised her wand. Finite incantatem. She screamed. Draco, witnessing this unfold, barely had time to think protego, as he lifted the Elder Wand in defense. The spell ricocheted off him, leaving his disguise unharmed, but at the bottom of the steps, his parents' transfigurations unraveled instantly. Meanwhile, Hermione, Harry, and Ron returned to their true forms, gasping in shock. Cries of disbelief echoed through the crowd. The goblins who recognized Harry hesitated, their daggers faltering, and gradually, a profound stillness enveloped the scene. Heads peeked out of windows along the street, and the throng of shoppers and shopkeepers began to inch closer once again. Amidst the silence, Draco could catch snippets of conversation. Harry Potter, Lucius Malfoy, look, it's Granger. But Bellatrix's focus remained solely on Harry Potter, she hissed, stepping closer to the edge of the steps. Several ministry officials seemed ready to strike, but Bellatrix interjected, "No, he is mine to deliver to the Dark Lord." With that, she pushed up her sleeve, revealing her dark mark. In that moment of distraction, Draco seized the opportunity. He aimed the Elder Wand and thought, "Defendo." The base of Bellatrix's leather pouch split open as if sliced by a sharp dagger. Out slipped a small golden cup, radiating a light as bright as the sun. Bellatrix let out a frantic cry and lunged for it. But the cup had already hit the edge of the step and began to tumble down the cobblestones. "Accio!" Draco shouted, his wand aimed with determination. He could hear Hermione, Harry, and Ron echoing his call, "Accio!" But the Horcrux must have been enchanted to resist, as it flew further away, evading their grasp. Faster, propelling himself head over heels down the steps, Draco launched himself toward the cup. In his peripheral vision, he noticed the others doing the same. Ron was closest. He dove headfirst for the Horcrux, while Harry snatched the moleskin pouch from around his neck. From it, he pulled the sword of Godric Gryffindor, eliciting gasps from the onlookers. The cup was just inches away from Ron's grasp. Draco brandished the Elder Wand and shouted, "Abriaris." A sharp, metallic ping echoed as the cup rebounded off an invisible barrier. Ron let out a triumphant shout as it bounced right back into his waiting hand. Draco rushed to his side, ready to bolt through the crowd, but Bellatrix's voice cut through the chaos, freezing them in their tracks. "Very good, now, you will return that to me." A chill swept through Draco as he realized that only Harry and Ron were by his side. They all turned to face her. Bellatrix stood at the top of the steps, her wand pressed against Hermione's throat. "No," Draco croaked. Harry and Ron shouted something too, but he couldn't hear them. The world around him shrank to the point where Bellatrix's wand touched Hermione's skin. She was immobilized, her hair cascading over Bellatrix's shoulder, coppery like the scattered nuts around them. Draco's gaze locked onto Hermione's. He could see the frantic thoughts racing through her mind, desperate calculations for escape. His own mind spun with plans as well. Could they intimidate Bellatrix by threatening the cup? What leverage did they have left? They had made emergency escape plans with Dobby and Winky, but something must have gone awry, as the elves were nowhere to be found. No one moved. Draco stood with the Elder Wand in hand, Harry wielded the sword of Gryffindor, and Ron clutched the cup of Hufflepuff. All the power in the world felt utterly useless. "Well done, sissy, Lucius," Bellatrix purred, her voice dripping with malice. She cast her imperious gaze upon the rest of the group, a crowd of gathered wizards. "Seize them." Harry sprang into action before any of the Ministry wizards could react, snatching the Horcrux from Ron's grasp and pressing it against the edge of his sword. "I don't think so," he shouted defiantly. "Let her go, or we destroy this. I doubt your boss would appreciate that, would he? I've noticed you don't seem too keen on calling him here anymore." The Ministry wizards paused, glancing at Bellatrix for guidance, but Draco could hear the desperation lacing Potter's voice. If they actually destroyed the cup, Bellatrix would kill Hermione without hesitation. Draco knew it was an empty threat, and Bellatrix knew it too. She let out a high, delighted laugh. "Oh, let us not play games, Potter. I know you care for your friends. I know you don't want to see this one harmed." Her smile twisted into a sinister leer. "You wish to strike a bargain? Here's my offer. Give me that cup, and for every moment you resist, I will add a new decoration on the mudblood, like so." Hermione's scream pierced the air, tearing through Draco's gut. A crimson cut formed beneath Bellatrix's wand tip, blood trickling down Hermione's neck. Diagon Alley seemed to blur around him. In that moment of sheer terror, a thought ignited in his mind. "God, just give it up, would you, Potter?" he said, shifting the elder wand so his transfiguration melted away. He stood bare under the bright sun, alive. Hermione's scream faltered, the surprise interrupting Bellatrix's curse. "Draco," his aunt called out, the murmurs in the crowd growing louder. The name Malfoy, Draco Malfoy, floated on the wind. Draco forced himself not to look at Hermione, resisting the urge to check if she was all right, even as every instinct screamed at him to do so. He couldn't show any reaction to her pain. "I told you," he said, managing a smirk as he stepped forward through the throng. The sound of coins spilling echoed around them. "I said I'd get Potter for you, Aunt Bella, and here he is." He shot a scornful glance back at Harry and Ron. Surprise, he sneered. "Did you really think I was on your side? That's the problem with you order people, isn't it? You can't imagine anyone doing anything for themselves." Harry and Ron stood frozen, speechless. He could almost hear their thoughts racing. "What are you doing?" He dared to raise his eyebrows slightly in their direction. "Trust me." Draco understood that even if he managed to hex Bellatrix and free Hermione, they would be immediately swarmed by Ministry wizards. But if he could convince Bellatrix to bring the others back to the Lestrange house for interrogation before summoning Voldemort, maybe there was still hope. All he needed was one moment alone with them, just one chance to set them free. Once they were out of immediate danger, they could figure out what to do about the cup. He glanced back at Bellatrix, almost seeking her approval. "Yes," she said slowly, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Yes, you've done well, Draco. I know. We weren't expecting to pull this off for months. I told Mother and Father that this meeting was crucial." "I knew it," he replied, his confidence wavering slightly. "Lucky indeed that you overheard those rats at work." Bellatrix smiled, but her gaze was still far too piercing for Draco's comfort. His mouth felt dry as he approached her. Casting casual glances at the goblins and Ministry workers flanking them, he couldn't appear defensive. He couldn't let the facade slip. Sweat trickled down his back. Just a few steps away from Bellatrix, he recalled the last time he had stood face to face with her, the venomous words she had hissed before striking him with her wand. "Clear your mind," he realized what she intended to do an instant too late. "Legilimens," she cried. Draco, forcing himself to hold the elder wand casually at his side, didn't lift it in time. But as the spell struck him, and instinctively, his mind went blank, he dropped to his knees on the steps of Diagon Alley, where the brightness was almost blinding. He felt Bellatrix clawing through the slick surface of his thoughts, desperate for a grip. He knew he couldn't afford to think of a spell, not even to raise his wand. If he did, she would dig deeper. So, he let his gaze soften, drifting into a blur, a canvas of blue sky, white marble, and fluffy clouds. Everything became bright, beautiful, blank, and impenetrable. He allowed certain thoughts to flit across the surface of his mind, keeping them perfectly controlled. He envisioned himself sitting with his parents in their tent, discussing how to reach Potter. He recalled storming through Hogsmeade last summer, every action fueled by resentment and reluctance. Once, Bellatrix had called him a natural. And perhaps he had been. But he had no memories that could betray him, no cracks of uncertainty or dependency, nothing he cared for deeply enough to make himself vulnerable. He wasn't thinking of Hermione. He wasn't looking at her. He could feel Bellatrix's mental assault withdrawing. The blazing sun and swirling sky began to settle around him, the effects of the spell starting to lift. Then, in an instant, Bellatrix wrapped her arm around Hermione's throat. Hermione let out a choked cry, and Draco's gaze snapped to her. He couldn't help it. The sight of her, the smear of blood across her neck, her warm brown eyes, the lips he could picture laughing. Terror for her life crashed over him like a tidal wave. Not just a fissure, but a chasm. Bellatrix seized the opportunity and wrenched his mind open. Draco collapsed, screaming, on the steps of Gringotts. In his mind's eye, he was reliving the harrowing events of the past year, but through his watery vision, he could still see Bellatrix's vindictive pleasure, her rage and hatred, as her outstretched wand maintained the connection. Somewhere in the back of his consciousness, he heard his parents screaming. Bellatrix, Bella. No. In that brief moment of distraction, the spell's grip lessened, and he felt a counter-hex take hold. Draco's instincts kicked in, channeling a kind of magic that stemmed from legilimency. A brilliant bolt of light shot from the elder wand, striking Bellatrix squarely in the shoulder and breaking her hold on him. The force of his own hex sent Draco reeling back. He felt himself slipping, tumbling down the galleon's slick steps as ministry workers and goblins scrambled to avoid him, as if his very touch could bring death. Just when it seemed he would fall, two pairs of hands caught him, steadying him. It was Harry and Ron, helping him back to his feet. Gasping for breath and aching all over, Draco dared to nurture a flicker of hope that the spell might have loosened Bellatrix's grip on Hermione, that she might have escaped. But that hope quickly extinguished. The two women stood as they had before, though now an angry mark marred Bellatrix's collarbone. So. Bellatrix panted, her wand again poised against Hermione's neck, her mouth twisted into a menacing grin, exposing her teeth. So this was the truth all along, Draco, you, the heir of the Malfoy name, you abandon your own family to side with muggles and half-breeds. You debase yourself with this mud blood. Draco clenched his fists, fury roiling within him, while aftershocks of pain coursed over his skin. He recognized Bellatrix's tactics. She sought to provoke him into some noble speech, only to humiliate him by torturing Hermione. But he would give her nothing. He had already shown his truth. There was nothing left to prove. Instead, he locked eyes with Hermione, desperately trying to conjure an escape plan. But it was futile. Their last chance had vanished. They were utterly surrounded, impossibly outnumbered. He saw the hollow terror reflected in her gaze, the stark absence of hope. Look at your parents, Draco, Bellatrix spat, her frustration evident. She always despised being ignored. Look. See what your filthy blood traitor loyalties have done to one of the oldest wizarding families in the world, and then you will hand me the cup of the covenant. She pressed her wand deeper into Hermione's throat. Do it, unless you want me to spill all of her filthy blood. Draco forced himself to turn. Near the bottom of the steps, he caught sight of his parents' shocked expressions. Is it true? His mother asked faintly, her voice barely reaching him. He lowered his head in a single, silent nod. Narcissa swayed slightly, as if the slightest breeze might knock her off balance, but Lucius sprang into action, moving forward with purpose. No, he called out, using the railing to pull himself up the steps through the shifting gold. No, Bellatrix. He's confused. The order has warped his mind. He doesn't know what he's saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, Father, Draco replied, his voice hard and clear. Stop this. You must see reason, Draco. Lucius reached him and seized him by the shoulders. In the glow of the late afternoon sun, the lines on his face seemed to vanish, making him appear almost youthful, more like Draco than he had in years. Don't you see? Lucius breathed, agitation creeping into his voice. You've done it. Potter is here. You've helped bring him here. All this, he swept his arm out, gesturing to the mountain of gold, will be the least of our spoils. When we give Potter to the Dark Lord, we will be elevated beyond all you can imagine. I said no. Draco's voice rang out, firm and resolute. Lucius released him, confusion etched across his features. Father and son locked eyes, and in that moment, Draco saw Lucius desperately grasping for a shred of understanding. Then, Bellatrix's voice echoed down from the top of the steps. Pathetic, she said coldly. The Dark Lord was always right about you, Lucius. You are weak. Your son could never be anything but weak. Your line deserves to end in disgrace. Lucius's expression darkened, the hesitation fading as his eyes burned into Draco's. "You don't see what's best," he murmured. "Of course, you're just a boy. How could I expect you to make these judgments?" His voice erupted into a fanatical snarl. "I will tell the Dark Lord what you did to help us. Everything will go back to the way it was, you'll see, and you will thank me." Before Draco could respond, his father lunged for Harry. With one hand, Lucius raised his wand, while the other reached for Hufflepuff's cup. In that moment, two deafening cracks pierced the air, a pair of small figures materialized. Dobby, his expression strained as he looked up at Hermione, seized Harry's and Ron's hands. Winky grasped Draco's. Everything unfolded in slow motion. Dobby yanked Harry backward with surprising strength. Lucius's hand stretched out, groping and searching, but instead of grasping Hufflepuff's cup, it clamped onto the haft of Gryffindor's sword. The sword tore free from Harry's grip, and Lucius let out a howl of frustration. But he had overreached. He staggered on the spilled galleons, arms flailing, mouth agape as he struggled to regain his balance. Lucius fell backward, the sword in his hand gleaming beautifully in the sunlight. As he crashed onto the spread of gold, the pristine tip of the sword, infused with the deadly venom of the basilisk, traced a bright red gash across his neck. Draco stood in shock, his mouth agape but no sound escaping. He felt a sudden pressure on his wrist as Winky invoked the same elf spell as Dobby, the escape plan they had devised. He realized the elves had waited until the last moment to implement it, hoping Hermione might slip free from Bellatrix's grasp, but the time had come. In an instant, Draco, Harry, and Ron flew backward through the air, away from the chaos, faster than the gathered wizards could aim their wands, the Horcrux glimmering in Ron's hand, in that final moment. All Draco could do was watch. He watched as his mother let out an anguished scream, sinking to her knees at the bottom of the stairs. He looked down at the steps, watching as Hermione fought against Bellatrix's hold. Her face turned toward them, a mixture of fear and determination, but it faded as they moved further away. He saw his father, motionless for the last time, sprawled across a sea of Gringotts gold, the final testament to everything he had amassed.